Hey everybody, I am DJ Riley, one of the hosts from Boys on the Bench, and I am back with my top 5 NBA prize picks trying to hit that 10 times multiplier. Now, if you followed along yesterday, we did go 2 of 5 on our bets with Mikal Bridges and DeJounte Murray hitting their lines quite easily, where on the other hand, Cam Thomas and Tyrese Maxey did not hit their lines. They were fouling more than they were scoring yesterday. Maxey started off hot with 7 points in the first 6 minutes, but also 3 fouls. So it took his aggressiveness away, took him and sat him on the bench for a good chunk of time. Whereas on the other hand, Thomas shot the ball a ton. In fact, he shot the ball 21 times, only made 4 of them, meaning that he had more fouls than he had field goals made. So not very good there. Reeves, very productive game, 11 assists, but only 9 points on 3 of 8 shooting. So if we had only one more of those shots fall, we were sitting pretty good. Now, before we jump into today's picks, guys, make sure you're subscribing to this channel, hitting that notification bell, getting notified anytime that these videos are dropping, because again, they are coming out daily. Also, make sure you're checking the links in the description, because down there you will find our X profile where these bets are being dropped for free, 100% stress-free. Nothing you have to worry about. They will be posted there daily as well. Now, also in the description, you will see Daily Grind Fantasy, which is one of the best positive EV betting tools that you can use. And guys, you need to start incorporating positive EV into your betting habits on a more consistent basis in order to be a more profitable bettor long term. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and jump into these top 5 picks that I have for you today. First on this list is Jabari Smith Jr. going over 7.5 rebounds plus assists. He does have a 1-game history versus this Indiana Pacers team on December 26th, where he did only have 6 rebounds plus assists on 34 minutes of play. Now, if we look at what Daily Grind Fantasy is giving us, they're giving this a 54.1% chance of hitting with an average juice of minus 142. So these are great odds that we are getting from Daily Grind Fantasy. That 54% is exactly what we're looking for, and we are getting that with Jabari Smith Jr. Now, looking at his recent performances and how he's done, he's hit 2 out of his last 5 and 6 out of his last 10. Now, if we go back over his last 30 games, he's also hit this in 20 out of his last 30. Now, the reason he hasn't hit this in his last 3 is he hasn't played really a whole lot. In those games, he's only played a max of 24 minutes. In those games, he is coming off of an injury where he did miss a little bit of time, so they're slowly starting to work him in. But then also Houston has been playing very bad basketball, where their last 2 games were blowouts of 20-plus points in each of those games. So coming into a game right now versus this Indiana Pacers team, who is just bad in terms of rebounds plus assists, allowing the 11th most of the power forward position, but also Jabari Smith is set to see more minutes today, expecting that this game is a lot closer than it has been recently for them. And he's had at least a week under his belt recovering from this injury. Now, in games where he's seen at least 27 minutes of play, he's hit this over in 26 of 33 times this season, which is about 80% of the time. So I really like him in this matchup again versus this Indiana Pacers team, who allows the 11th most rebounds plus assists to the power forward position. But let's go ahead and move on to the next pick. And it's the same game, but it's Miles Turner going under 16.5 points plus assists. Again, that 1-game history versus this Houston Rockets team on December 26th. In that game, he had 19 points plus assists on 24 minutes of play. Now, if we look at what Daily Grind Fantasy is giving us, they're giving this a 52.1% chance of hitting with an average juice of minus 129. So again, the juice of minus 129 is not bad, but we would prefer those odds to be a lot higher than 52%, but still not a bad bet here to be taking. Now, if we look at recent performances, he's hit this under in 2 out of his last 5 and 4 out of his last 10. Now, if we look at his last 10 games, yes, he hasn't done well at hitting the under, but the defenses that he's been facing have all allowed top 10 points to centers. His last 5 of those games have all gone over. Every other one of those outside of the most points allowed to center, he's went under in those games. Right now, Houston to the center position allows the 17th least amount of points to the center position and the 3rd least points plus assist to that position. Now, in those games where he's hitting his unders and playing teams outside of the top 10, he's only averaging 9 points and 1 assist. So he's not even getting close to this at all. So he is coming into a tough matchup versus this Houston team. And yes, they've struggled a little bit recently, but they've still been very dominant versus that center position. So do not love this spot for Miles Turner if you're looking at the over. Love it if you're looking at the under, however. Now, let's move on to the next pick, and that's Simone Fonchetto going over 7.5 points. Does have a 2-game history versus this OKC Thunder team. And his most recent game on January 18th, he had 12 points on 29 minutes of play. And then earlier this year, he played on December 11th. And in that game, he had 19 points on 23 minutes of play. So easily clearing both of these in those games. Now, if we look at what Daily Grind Fantasy is giving us, they're giving us a 53.6% of hitting and an average juice of minus 136. So again, another play of nearly 54%. So really liking that here. Now, looking at recent performances, he's hit this in 2 out of his last 5 and also 7 out of his last 10. Where I really like him in this matchup, though, is OKC has been plagued with injuries up to this point. Right now, they have 10 people listed on their injury report. They've obviously been struggling in their last game versus this Raptors a couple days ago. They played very competitive. Although they were 9-point favorites, this game went into overtime. They did end up winning, but it went into overtime versus a very bad Raptors team, and that was all due to these injuries and them just trying to figure it out as it went on. Now, Simone is remained consistent for the most part this entire season, where we see him averaging roughly 7 field goal attempts per game. Now, if we break it down to where games we see him shooting 7 field goal attempts, he's hit this over in 22 out of 29 of the games this season. And if you look at how OKC has done versus a small forward position, they've allowed the 11th most points to small forwards. So again, really like him. He's done really well in his 2 games versus OKC this season. OKC is not great versus small forwards, and they are injury ridden up to this point in the season. So everything is pointing up for him today. Now, if we move on to the next pick, it's in the same game, and that's Chet Holmgren going over 2.5 assists. Again, that 2-game history versus Utah. In their most recent matchup, he had 5 assists on 32 minutes. And then in a December matchup, he had 2 assists on only 25 minutes of play. Now, looking at what Daily Grind Fantasy is giving us, they're giving us a 54.4% chance of hitting with an average juice of minus 141. So again, another great play here of 54%. Now, looking at recent performances, he's hit this over in 3 out of his last 5 and 6 out of his last 10, but he's also hit this in 10 out of his last 15, with 3 of those being hooks. So he could have hit this number at such a higher rate than he has, but it's still very good, even going back to his last 15 games. Right now, if we look at how Utah does versus assists, they allow the 2nd most assists in all of the NBA. They also allow the 3rd most points from threes, which is where I think that Chet is going to do a very good job today, kicking the ball out and getting a ton of assists from outside of the arc today. Also, with all of the injuries I mentioned, I feel like Chet is due for plenty of minutes today if players are having to sit out. Now, if we look at how the Jazz do versus center in terms of assists, they allow the 7th most. But again, in terms of all of the NBA, they allow the 2nd most. So anyways, that brings us to our last pick today, and that is Cameron Johnson going over 17.5 points plus assists. Does not have a head-to-head matchup versus the Dallas Mavericks this season. So if we look at what Daily Grind Fantasy is giving us in terms of positive EV, they're giving us a 52.4% chance of hitting with an average juice of minus 131. Now, if we look at recent performances, he has hit this over in 2 out of his last 5 and 4 out of his last 10. So not too great if we look at his last 10 games, his last 10 game logs here. But where I really like this is Dallas has allowed 4 out of the last 5 power forwards with at least 18 plus points plus assist lines to hit the over. And the one that missed was at 17. So players who do fairly well, have decently high lines, they are allowing plenty of points plus assists to those positions. So Johnson, as well, over the last 10 games, he's had at least 3 assists in 7 out of those last 10 games. And over those games, he's also averaging 10 field goal attempts over that span as well. So looking at how Dallas does versus this power forward position in terms of points plus assists, they allow the 7th most. So I really like this. They allow the 7th most. versus power forwards who have pretty high lines, they struggle with. And Cameron Johnson has been passing the ball very good lately. Now, that brings us to the end of this, guys. These are my top 5 picks for these NBA Tuesday matchups. Now, before you check out, please make sure you're subscribing to this channel. Drop a comment below. Let me know which ones you're tailing. Let me know which ones you're fading. Maybe which pick I missed out on and that you thought was a lot better, and how did I miss it? Okay. Let me know that all in the comments below, because all of that helps this channel grow. Anyways, thank y'all so much. Best of luck to y'all on this Tuesday, and I will see y'all tomorrow.